Always a highlight of the week, it's time for Uncancelled with the esteemed journalist and author Tom Bower. And speaking at a state banquet tonight during his state visit to Kenya, King Charles did confront Britain's colonial past, but resisted calls for an apology. Take a listen.
We must also acknowledge the most painful times of our long and complex relationship. The wrongdoings of the past are a cause of the greatest sorrow and the deepest regret. There were abhorrent and unjustifiable acts of violence committed against Kenyans, and for that, there can be no excuse.
Tom Bower joins me in the studio. Tom, does the King struggle with these issues, or is he a natural diplomat and a natural politician?
I don't think he's a natural diplomat or a natural politician. I think he does struggle because he knows very well that, of course, terrible things did happen during the Mau Mau period, but more Kenyans were murdered by Kenyans, many, many more than by the British. And it's all vastly exaggerated, the suffering caused by the British, because it's the work of left-wing American academics who've lied, positively lied about what happened during the
same as more
period.
Palestinians will suffer at the hands of Hamas and their policies than Israel.
Exactly, and that's the problem with history. But unfortunately, the Foreign Office bowed to this argument that Britain had been terrible during the colonial period. But in fact, when Kenyatta became the first president of Kenya, the first thing he did was appeal to the British to help him rule Kenya. So he'd been the head of Mau Mau. So, the whole thing has been completely turned on its head. And the British have a hugely advantageous reputation still in Kenya to this day because of the legacy of the imperial past. I mean, Kenya is a booming, very flush African country, unlike many others, thanks to the British legacy.
Prince William, the Prince of Wales, has been confronted on trips to the Commonwealth himself in Africa and elsewhere, often by sort of crowds whipped up by populist politicians, making a headline and winning support. Do you think that the new incumbent, the King and his son, might yield to pressure in the future to say sorry or even have reparations?
Well, no, there'll be no reparations. No government could be that foolish. And I think, frankly, Labour
government?
Well, Labour government, hopefully Charles will say I'm not out of my mouth. You're quite right. But, I mean, the truth is that we're reaching this odd period at the moment with the colonial past. I mean, South Africa has suffered terribly under its victorious ANC government. Kenya has flourished thanks to the British legacy. And it's about time that the British and other colonial, especially Britain, stops saying sorry for what it left behind. It did some bad things. There's no doubt there were some horrors, but there were also a lot of good things done as well.
Privately, would the King like to apologise? Because
I think not.
He's on the woke side, isn't he?
Yeah, no, he wouldn't like to. Of course not. He knows there's all written for him. And in fact, after the Falklands War, when he was in Argentina, he was pretty good at supporting the British cause there after they removed the dictator. So, history is being rewritten by these left-wing academics, and we should resist it.
He is in Kenya. It's a significant state visit. Do you think he enjoys these occasions? Is he enjoying his new job as King?
I fear not. I mean, he never liked going to Africa. He was forced to go to Africa shortly before he became King because he neglected the Commonwealth. He liked going to the white Commonwealth countries. He liked going a lot to India, but he avoided Africa if he could. But
why?
He just didn't find it culturally very interesting, whereas he was very interested in the culture of India. And the real truth is Camilla doesn't like travelling long distances. I think he does find it very difficult now. He doesn't look as if he's enjoying the job, having waited so long for it. But in the end, you see, the Commonwealth will fall apart unless he works hard at it.
Well, yes, he's been in the waiting room for decades, and we can rejoice in that fact because we enjoyed a long reign from Queen Elizabeth II. But now that he's king, do you think he's found peace as a human being?
I think he's found happiness with Camilla, but I think he's finding it a struggle to find a way in which he can impose a Carolingian era. I mean, what will he be remembered for? And not even an airport terminal at the moment.
Do you think he feels he's too old for the job?
I think he feels frustrated. I think he feels tired. He doesn't look like somebody who's attacking the job with a new zest and a new philosophy, and that's rather sad.
So right job, wrong time.
Well, right job, wrong time. But, you know, not every monarch is like Queen Elizabeth. Not every monarch like Queen Elizabeth. I mean, that was unique in our history.
Correct.
So, you know, we can't expect every time it to be the same.
No, and we're grateful for her longevity. Listen, let's talk about Boris Johnson, who's the subject of your excellent book, The Gambler, subjected to a slaying from his former chief advisor, Dominic Cummings. Take a listen to this.
You should trolley on it. Meaning?
Well, I'm still using the sort of generic term that we often used about the PM. Pretty much everyone called him the trolley, yeah.
Was the Prime Minister rather averse to attending Cobra on account of its physical location?
I mean, he certainly preferred to be in his study, and he didn't like going to Cobra.
Why did you want Michael Gove to be in charge of regular devolved administration updates and not the Prime Minister?
I thought Gove would handle it 10 times better.
Dominic Cummings pours a bucket of the brown stuff over his former boss. Was he right to do so?
No, I mean, the problem with Dominic Cummings is that he ran the Brexit campaign, was hated by most Conservative Brexiteers. I mean, as David Cameron rightly said for a change, he called him a career sociopath. I mean, he is a man who really is clinically suspect. And I thought,
although effective.
Well, he was very effective for the Brexit campaign, very effective for the election, but appalling man manager, appalling relationship person.
Because he picks fights with people.
He picks fights, but he humiliates people. But even today, what I found really very, very obnoxious about today was the terrific wisdom of hindsight. There he was saying we should have banned everyone coming in from China in the late 2019. Well, I mean, it was impossible. And even Patrick Vallance, the doctor, saying, the scientist saying something like that Boris wanted the old to die. Well, Vallance wanted the old to die. Originally, he was the man who said, we've got to go for herd immunity. We've got to let the old die. All these people forget what they themselves said. And Cummings is the last person, with Lee Kane, a fourth-rate ex-journalist. The real problem in all this is that Boris brought a lot of very disgraceful people into Downing Street with him. His appalling choice of people really is one of the reasons for his downfall. And Vallance was ill-equipped for the job. But most awful of all, it was Vallance who did not say to Boris Johnson that Public Health England was failing in their job. The two women running it were hopeless. The man in charge couldn't even get a job. It was the 13th job he applied for before he was made head of Public Health England, and Vallance said we can rely on PHE. And it was nonsense, we couldn't. So Boris was put into a corner, having been assured during January and February that all was in hand, all was being managed properly, and then was left with this terrible problem in March.
Well, now, of course, Patrick Vallance and the authorities would argue that all of the measures were significant in saving lives and serious illness, stopping the NHS from becoming overwhelmed. That's not my view, but that is the view of most mainstream scientists in this country. But Boris didn't agree either. It was his instinct to go for herd immunity and actually to let this virus rip. Because we've seen countries like Sweden that had very few measures, similar, if not better outcomes. So why didn't Boris follow his gut? These lockdowns were crazy.
Well, you've got to make a distinction with the first lockdown, where actually in March, Britain only locked down the same day as Germany and 5 days after France. And the country was locking itself down.
Sure. With
the second lockdown, that is the one he rightly opposed, because that is the one that wrecked the economy.
Why did he get his way? He was the Prime Minister.
Because he was surrounded by people who didn't support him.
Or
and that was his fault.
Or did he have a pathological weakness, which is the need to be liked?
Well, there was that and his wife. But also Cummings.
Lovely Carrie.
Awful Carrie. And the awful Lee Kane.
She's a good friend of mine.
Oh, well, there you are. You're not perfect completely, are you?